Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice 6-game Major League Baseball slate that starts at 7 o'clock. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really does help the channel a lot. So let's go and get into our pitchers here. We're going to start with Kevin Gausman for Toronto. Now, 15 to 25 fantasy point game seems the most likely here. Despite a somewhat tough matchup, he does have some upside, though his price may not be worth the production. He's still in play on a tough pitching slate today. I do think he's a viable option today. Kershaw for the Dodgers is in play today. He hasn't had a ton of 30 fantasy point games this year, but he is capable. However, he has a lot of 10 to 20 fantasy point games as well. That said, he's got as much upside in this matchup versus a weak team, and the K's are a concern for getting over 20 fantasy points, but a win is definitely doable here, and a very nice matchup, so I think he's one of the better options on the slate, though his consistency has remained a little bit inconsistent due to the fact that his strikeout rate is somewhat all up and down. Then we'll look at Kramer for Baltimore. He's faced Toronto twice, got decent finishes in both. He's had 13 strikeouts in the 2 games he faced against them. He has some upside today, though he does feel a little bit risky as Toronto does have some bats I do like. He still has some decent upside on this particular slate. And then Detmers for the Angels. He's flashed some good games this season. His floor is in the gutter, but he is capable of holding Cincinnati down today. He's got a good strikeout potential on this particular game, and so I do like his upside. He has been somewhat inconsistent throughout the season, though, so he is high risk, high reward. Um, as for the stackable teams, I definitely think the Dodgers, the Angels, Atlanta, and Boston are all definitely in play as well from that perspective. So do keep that in mind as well. So let's get into our catchers here. We're going to start with Will Smith for the Dodgers. He's facing Curry for the Cleveland, and he's got some really good home run metrics for this game. He is very expensive, so he does need to hit a home run really to pay off here, but he is capable of that today. He also hit one yesterday, so that gives him some more potential as well. Seems like he's probably getting back to hitting like he has been earlier in the season. He had been in a little bit of a slump, but it looks like he's doing pretty good now. So I do like him quite a bit today. Sean Murphy is also in play for Atlanta, though he has been very inconsistent recently. He's been in a bit of a slump, not getting a ton of hits lately, but he does draw home run metrics for this game. He's a good contrarian option off of Will Smith. Then we'll look at Alvarez for the Mets. Now he does have a risky matchup here against Morton, but he is kind of a boomer bust play with a home run potential. So and he's capable of that today. So he's in play. However, Yanier Diaz for Houston is a great option today as he's hitting the ball very well. With 3 home runs over the last 10 games, he's hitting the ball pretty solidly. He's not striking out a ton, and he's scoring fantasy points in different ways, and he's nice and cheap, but that gives him some potential on this particular slate. Moving to the first base, we'll look at Freddie Freeman. He has been very inconsistent recently. Seems like he's in a little bit of a slump. That said, he's still Freddie Freeman, and he's still capable of big games. He's had 3 straight games with hits now, so maybe can get a home run today. I do think he's definitely viable on this particular slate with the matchup that he has. Vlad Jr. is also in play for Toronto. He's a little bit cheaper than Freddie, and he's been hitting the ball decent, though he hasn't been hitting a ton of home runs recently. He's only had 1 in the last 10, but he is capable of a good game here, and he doesn't strike out much, which definitely gives him a lot of utility. So he can score fantasy points in a lot of different ways. Then we'll look at Brandon Belt for Toronto as well. Now he is facing Kramer, who I do think is a decent pitcher today, but he's had 4 home runs over his last 10 games that he's played, and he draws really good metrics for this game. He's actually had 2 straight really big games, so that gives him a lot of potential. I really like his upside in this matchup, and he's definitely a viable option, especially being dirt cheap. Then we'll look at Justin Turner for Boston. He's hit the ball very well this recently, and he's had some really big games lately, so I think he's a viable option on the slate. While Boston has been somewhat inconsistent, they definitely draw good metrics for this game, and he's one of my favorite bats on that team today. Moving to second base, we're going to start with Mookie Betts, who can also play in the outfield. He's hitting extremely well recently with 500 batting average over the last 10 games. He's just pounding the ball and scoring fantasy points in bunches. Even without the home runs, he's managed to score a lot, and he's even getting some stolen bases as well in yesterday's game. So I think he's a great option on the slate, though he is extremely expensive and high risk, high reward due to that price. Altuve is also in play. Now he's also hit the ball very well recently. He's been pretty good since he's been back this season, and he's got good fantasy point production for the most part. He's had a couple off games recently, but for the most part, he's hitting so well that he's hard to ignore. The price keeps rising and makes him harder to roster. Gabby Torres for the Yankees is in play today. Now, he has been inconsistent, but I do think he's a core play as he's nice and cheap and just draw good metrics here. I think the Yankees are somewhat sneaky today and have some potential to have a big fantasy point game for some of their bats. And then we'll look at Drury for the Angels. Now he has had 2 straight games with home runs. He's had 3 home runs over the last 10. Sorry, he's had 3 games in a row with home runs. That's what I meant. He's scoring a decent amount of fantasy points in this stretch, and I like his potential here. He's facing a weak Cincinnati pitcher as well, which gives him some more upside. And I do think the Angels are a stackable team today. Then we'll look at Austin Riley for Atlanta at third base. He has hit the ball inconsistent recently, which is a concern, but he does draw good home run upside in this matchup. He's also hit pretty well in some games against the Mets this season, so it's just a matter of time before he has another big home run. And I think today will likely be a day where he has a good opportunity to do so, especially against weak pitching. Rafael Devers has hit the ball very well recently, and he's the type of guy that I like to use him when he's hitting very well, and that's what he's doing right now. So while the iron is hot, he's definitely in play. He's also a little bit cheaper than Riley, which gives him some upside on this particular matchup. Excuse me, Alex Bregman for Houston is in play today as well. He's hitting the ball very well, as just like Devers and and he has nice home run potential today. Though he doesn't have the upside that Devers does, he's a little bit cheaper and gives you some more flexibility. Though he's still pretty expensive, but he is managing to score fantasy points in lots of different ways. Then we'll look at DJ LeMahieu. It's kind of a Hail Mary value play. He's hitting the ball decently well, but he doesn't always score a ton of fantasy points. You know, he has a lot of single-digit games. But he's nice and cheap today, and if he can get into double digits today, he'd definitely be a huge payoff to help you in the lineup, especially since he can play multiple positions, and he's nice and cheap. Then we'll look at Francisco Lindor for the Mets. Now, he does face a tough matchup against Morton, but he has hit the ball very well recently with a 357 batting average over the last 10. He's also torched Atlanta this season with 11 fantasy points per game in 10 games, so I like his upside here. He's had some really big games recently as well, so even without the home runs, he's scoring a lot of fantasy points, and that's really nice. Not only that, he does have that home run potential as well. C.J. Abrams is also in play for Washington. Now, he has not hit the ball very well recently, but he does get the boost of the stolen base potential because he's been getting a lot of those. And while he's doing that, he's been scoring really good fantasy points, which is causing his price to skyrocket, as you can see. But he is in play today as a contrarian option off of Lindor. Pena for the Houston Astros has been hitting pretty well recently. He's not got the ton of home run upside, but he does draw good metrics for this game. I do like his potential, and he's hitting the ball decently well recently. So then we'll look at Von Grisham for Atlanta. He has been inconsistent. Obviously, he's only played a handful of games, recently. He's just been brought back up, so he does draw some good metrics though, and he has some potential. He even has a little bit of stolen base potential and home run upside if he can pull it off today. I do think if he starts, that he'll be somebody that's worth rostering as he's nice and cheap. Moving to outfielders, we're going to start with Acuna Jr., who obviously has big-time upside. He's been a very good player for all season long. While he has been a little bit of a slump recently, he got some big hits yesterday, and he scored some pretty good fantasy points. He's been getting multi-hit games a lot too, so he does draw great metrics here and has nice upside. Aaron Judge looks like he's finally starting to round back into his old self. Had him in a couple home runs over the last few games, though he has struck out some too, which is a concern with him. He does have nice upside for a home run in this game, as he's facing a pitcher that has really bad potential from that perspective. Mookie Betts can also play here in the outfield. Mike Trout is back, and he is definitely in play today in a weak matchup here for the Angels. I look for him to have really good potential as well. Yesterday's game, he scored three fantasy points with a hit, but he's going to have some more potential today, and I like his upside, though he did say in the interview that he was banged up still a little bit. Giancarlo Stanton is in play today for the Yankees, but he is a home runner best call. He's always a home runner best call because he strikes out a lot, and he occasionally hits a big home run, so that's kind of where he sits today. But the Yankees are kind of a sneaky stack, and if you want to go with the Yankee stack, he's definitely somebody you can consider, especially with his price point. Varsho for Toronto also in play today. He's hit the ball pretty well recently with 3 home runs over the last 10 games. I really like his fantasy point production, and he's just playing very well right now. So even if you go with the Baltimore pitcher, you could still throw him in there as a value Hail Mary. Even if he does manage a home run today, it wouldn't kill your pitcher totally. Chase McCormick for Houston is also in play here. He's hit the ball very well recently with a 315 batting average over the last 10. He's had 4 home runs in that stretch, and he comes off to me as a very good option on the slate. He seems like Houston is in a good spot here against Chris Sale, so I think he's a viable potential guy. Brandon Nemo has hit the ball very well recently with a 366 batting average. He's even scoring home runs. I'm a little concerned about his strikeouts increasing, but I still think he's got some really good potential in this game, and he has home run upside, which is definitely nice as well. TJ Friedl also in play for Cincinnati. He has not been consistent throughout the season, but he has some home run metrics for this game, and he has managed to score fantasy points in a couple different ways, and that definitely makes him a potential option on the slate. Maniac for the Angels he is a Hail Mary play. He's hit the ball absolutely terribly recently. He's a complete boom or bust call, but he does have home run metrics in this matchup. Ozuna is a guy I really like today, as he is just monstering the ball with a 500 batting average over the last 10 games. He's had 17 hits in that stretch. He has nice home run potential, and when he gets hot, he's definitely somebody to consider. But he'll get cold real fast at some point, and so do keep that in your awareness. And then Harrison Bader for the Yankees. He's also been pretty cold, but he is a Hail Mary play today with home run potential. So, with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.